Welcome everyone to the Cambridge Power Platforms User Group's Spring 2024 event. We've got a fantastic lineup of people here for you today, and I'm so glad you're here. So with that, when you're attending, we'd like to make you aware of a few things. We just asked you to be courteous, so please be aware of others, be friendly and patient, welcoming, respectful, open to all questions and viewpoints, understanding of differences, be kind and considerate to others, and be aware that we are recording. So if you don't want to be seen, turn the camera off and don't make yourself seen. So unfortunately, Sharon is not available today, so I will be hosting in her stead. My name is Sancho Harker. I am a business apps MVP for 4 years now, nearly 5 years. And I work alongside Sharon as well. So you see at the bottom there where it says works with an awesome and highly skilled team. We've got people like me, Luke, and Amber who are awesome. So yeah, I've been also been a super user in the Power Apps community forum for 5 years now. And I have a blog and I do all sorts of cool things. You can look me online later. I'm not the important one today, the speakers are. So today we have a huge group of wonderful people. We have Gertrude Toronto, we have Liz Sundet, and we have Zoe Wilson and Kevin McDonnell. So next up, we have Kevin McDonnell and Zoe Wilson. If you don't know who they are, what have you been doing? Because absolute legends in the community. Likewise, MVPs like myself, and just absolute fonts of information that really you should be going out there and finding out what they've been talking about. Follow them on the socials, get involved, ask questions. So we've got Zoe and Kevin who will be showing us connecting the Copilots with Copilot Connection. Another topic I wish I had more information on, so this is really great timing. Kevin and Zoe, do you want to go and introduce yourself a little bit further?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Sancho. So Kevin, I think you're just bringing up the slides, aren't you?
Yep, there we go.
There we go. Perfect. Okay, so first of all, it's a huge pleasure for Kevin and I to be here today, talking to you about the many Copilots, shall we say, that Microsoft have released, and how we're trying to connect the dots a little bit with Copilot Connection. I'm Zoe Wilson. I am a global practice lead in the modern work business at Avanade. I'm a regional director as well as an MVP and a Viva Explorer. I don't quite know where I find the time for all of that, to be honest. But one of the things
I don't think you
do. Yeah, but one of the things over the last year that I've been incredibly passionate about is just trying to cut through some of the noise and confusion when it comes to all of the different Copilots.
Hello, I'm Kevin McDonnell. I work with Zoe at Avanade, and I'm relatively recently, but almost getting the hang of saying it, the Copilot strategy and modern workplace AI lead at Avanade. And what that means is I'm not just looking at M365 on there, I'm looking across all the different Copilots, and that's something very passionate about, that there's so many different ones within there, as well as extending those Copilots, looking at custom Copilots, where they're looking at things like Copilot Studio, taking it out, build your own with things like Teams AI, or just some of the, actually I'm going too far, I'm going to spread half the slides we're talking about as well. As Zoe mentioned, we're both MVPs on there. You'll notice I'm not wearing a very funky hoodie like Zoe, because she's going to pass it on to me soon, hopefully arriving very soon with our nice new logo. So looking forward to that one. Also a Viva Explorer, so it's great to hear from Liz, also a Viva Explorer as well, where we like to share the word. But I think that's what we enjoy doing. That's why we're MVPs. We love trying to understand where the challenges are, and now Liz has gone, we can say, I have heard occasionally Microsoft doesn't always make clear some of these things. So we like to cut through that and try and make it a little bit easier. And that's what we want to do today. We do this ish every other week. So I know we're meant to do one tomorrow, but it may fail. So around every other week, we try and share this through the Copilot Connection podcast. I'm going to try and bring some of the summary of that to you today. So in terms of what we talk about, we're going to talk about that story and evolution of Copilot, how it's got through to where it is today. We'll talk about the different types, the different services, how they fit into how you would use them, who would you use them, that sort of thing as well. But because this is the Power Platform user group, and I'm kind of aware that you've just had a whole session on Amplify and then a whole session of Copilot, we're going to try and bring this back to a little bit of the Power Platform story within this as well. And some of the real opportunities, the power of it, and maybe some of the not quite so good things that some of you might have heard about and heard complaining with there as well. A nice thing, and I know Donna Sarker talked about this, the South Coast Summit. It was one of the headline things that for people in that Power Platform space, you are in such a good position to really take advantage of Copilot and the story. So we're going to explain that a bit more as to why we think that. And then we're going to do some shameless self-promotion about how you can hear more on that as well. But let's start off with that journey, that evolution within there as well. It really started off, if we're looking at this world of generative AI and this world of the flow of work with things really was open AI. There's lots of things. There's that learning around neural networks, and we can talk about that story of AI, machine learning. But it was open AI that's really driven things. And it started off with that non-profit open source organization. Please, no one mention Elon Musk as part of this. Because it then moved on to that 2019, that they really changed their structure to have a non-profit element. They still have a very strong core in that, but then to move an area where Microsoft invested in, they could build a product, they could make things happen. And it was around, I think 2020 that I first started to hear about this and try the API. I was like, I can ask things in natural language and get responses back, but using an API. And I was like, this is really nice. And in fact, I've still got a project unfinished from then about building out fake environments that you could kind of write an email, write a text, and have a fake environment powered by that. And I'd still love to bring that through. But the big jump was that, in fact, that 2020, that GPT-3 was really the power of that model. And that continued as I added the wrong text into that, I've just noticed on there. It continued there with using some of those models within GitHub Copilot, as well as some of their own ones that allowed you to query that. That was the first notion of people hearing the Copilot phrase. And it's a really important one because it talks about being that person that's with you, that helps you. And especially for developers, it's your kind of side developer. For those who remember the days of extreme programming, sharing a keyboard and working together. GitHub Copilot was like that. And it was this notion that when ChatGPT came out in 2022, that was the fastest ever service that's been out there. And it really took the world by storm. One of the things I do in my tiny bit of spare time is as a cub leader. And I remember going on a hike and chatting to one of the parents, and they said, "Oh, you work in technology. Have you heard about this ChatGPT thing?" And I was like, my goodness, I've never heard someone talk about Viva at all like this, which is a little bit sad to me on there. But this was the power that it was getting to people that it wasn't before. And in 2023, Microsoft took this even further and announced Copilot that was releasing the power of those GPTs into the flow of work. Yes, an overused phrase, but it was the reality about how they bake things in. And I think, Zoe, that's really where the magic started to happen, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was indeed. And actually, it's really interesting that you talk about, people on the Cubs trips asking you about ChatGPT. I found that in the last year with ChatGPT and with Copilot, I've been having conversations with like all kinds of random people. The lady who does my nails, I was talking to her about how she can use ChatGPT to help her craft her marketing messages. And one of my friends who's in a non-technical job messaged me a few months ago to tell me that she was using Copilot to edit her SharePoint pages. And she was talking about Bing Chat. But, these are just two examples of people that I would never talk to about the technology that we work with. And it just demonstrates how far-reaching this is and how well it's really got into the kind of global mindshare of people who don't work in tech. So like Kevin said, ChatGPT went live November 22 and was the fastest growing service that we've seen. And what we saw in 2023 was really it was the year of Copilots, the year of Microsoft kind of taking mindshare by getting that first mover advantage. And the image that you can see on screen here is Satya at Davos in January. And he was interviewed by, I think it was the Wall Street Journal. And he said in this interview that he made this public commitment that they would incorporate AI products from OpenAI into all of their products. So, that's only 2 months after ChatGPT became available, and he was very quickly making his intentions clear. Before that, though, so Kevin's talked about GitHub Copilot. That's been around a little bit longer. Viva Sales also has that embedded AI as well, and that had actually been around for a little bit of time. So there were products that actually predated Copilot that have kind of come into this Copilot ecosystem. But if we think about that commitment in January last year to put the OpenAI tools into all of the products, what we then saw was a fast follow. So in February, there was an event where they announced the new AI-powered Bing search engine and the new Edge browser. And, again, if we think about this in terms of the time it's taking to get these announcements out, that was a really fast follow. One of the things that struck me about the pace of innovation that we've seen in the last year is that this is probably only possible because the developers at Microsoft are using GitHub Copilot to be able to accelerate their own development lifecycle, which when you think about it, I think is just phenomenal. So February, we had Bing and Edge. In March, we had Copilot for Dynamics. Kevin, do you want to just talk about these a little bit?
No, I was enjoying you trying to use the old names instead of the new ones a little bit too much there, which was entertaining as well. So I think you've got these different Copilots within that side for Dynamics. And what's interesting about these, that's they kind of came in, it's those different surfaces that people can use. So it's accelerating that capability. We had that Viva Sales that was helping people get to the sales lifecycle, but suddenly by bringing it into Dynamics, you could make it easier to ask questions like, I'm going to a client meeting. What's the last 5 engagements we've had with this client? What's the combined value? And you didn't have to go through, I'm sure many of you are technical, listen to this, and you're quite happy going out and creating different views and filtering that. But for many people, that takes time and kind of becomes more painful. Suddenly you could have that natural language way of doing that. And that would extend to things like customer services. So being able to power that customer service engagement of, I need to answer this. So like that sales engagement, what has this customer had issues with? What have they bought recently? What's likely to be the problem? And what is likely to be a solution, nudging people towards the right things. You can be more efficient. And an interesting, this is probably a slightly separate one, but I've seen in Copilot for Microsoft 365, there's more of a story when it's not necessarily saving time all the time, but it's making the quality of what you are doing better more quickly as well. So you're able to do things more effectively in the time that you have doing as well. And that comes in a lot of this with that supply chain, that ability to know where things are going, to analyze that data more effectively as well. And looking through, we then saw into March going into this Copilot for Microsoft 365. And I know Zoe and I talk about this a lot. It's, you can have a conversation with people about Copilot and realize you're talking about very different ones from people. I can't remember, it was a chat group I was in, and I was chatting to someone like, oh, Copilot's awful, it really doesn't help at all. I was like, oh, I found it's really good. Yeah, you can generate documents and things like that. And they were like, oh, no, I meant in, I think it was Power Apps they were talking about. I was like, okay, yeah, I won't fight you too much more on that one. But you can have these conversations about the different one. But then maybe this is my modern work world, but I see this Copilot in Copilot for Microsoft 365 being that really powerful one. It then continued on into Power Apps, which we will come back to later. What the artist formerly known as Power Virtual Agents started to bring more AI power, and we'll hear how that changed soon as well. And then Security Copilot, and this I think is one of the hidden ones, because it only really serves a smaller group within there of those security individuals. But suddenly, and I don't know if any of you have had to go through logs and logs and logs. I remember my .NET days, and even before .NET, my lovely ASP ones that would fire things out to a log file on there. And it was just painful trying to look for patterns for those who may have looked after a SharePoint on-premise environment, trying to look for patterns, trying to work out where things have gone wrong. Maybe if you're lucky, exporting it to Excel and doing things there. Suddenly with Security Copilot, again, you can ask those questions for it to analyze that's come through. Zoe, we had even more Copilots come through as well, didn't we?
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about this in terms of timing, and to me, the timing of all of this and the speed and the velocity just really demonstrates how fast things are changing. So we had ChatGPT go viral in November. Sachi said in January we're going to put this stuff in all the bad things. And by this point, you know, we're already in the tens of Copilots being announced, and following Microsoft 365 and the Power Platform. We saw Windows Copilot being announced. We saw Copilot in Fabric, Copilot in Power BI, Copilot in Azure, and there are tons more that we didn't even get onto these slides as well, which just demonstrates how far-reaching this is and how deeply Microsoft are embedding this into all of their products. Now, we also saw renames. So Bing became Microsoft Copilot. Not confusing at all. You know, Kevin always laughs at me because I refer to it as the artist formerly known as Bing, because if you just say Microsoft Copilot to someone, they haven't got a clue what you're on about, because there are so many different Copilots that it could relate to. Kevin's already mentioned Power Virtual Agents being renamed. That was renamed to Copilot Studio. And then we've got the whole kind of, you know, is it a Copilot in or for, which we'll talk to you about in a little bit as well. So lots and lots of renames, which adds to the amount of stuff that we all have to keep up with. And then alongside the product announcements, we've also had the different early access programs as well. So alongside the announcement for Copilot for Microsoft 365, in May, I think it was, they announced that they'd be running an early access program. And this was really interesting because this is the first time that I've seen Microsoft run a pay-to-play private preview. And when we think about how they normally run private previews, they're typically run, they're secret squirrel. You know, people are not allowed to tell anybody that they're in a private preview, and all of the feedback to the product group happens in private. And at some point that Microsoft will kind of share their findings, and then it becomes generally available. So what we saw with the strategic importance of Copilot to Microsoft was that they actually ran the private preview for Copilot for M365 in the open. So from a T's and C's perspective, clients who were in the private preview were still not meant to talk about the fact that they were in it, but you know, it was generally a really badly kept secret about who was participating. But because everybody wanted to be in this, we had clients kind of coming to us and escalating and saying, like, we can't get in the preview. Can you help us? How do we get in? And there were lots of organizations who didn't really understand what this was going to do to their business. You know, they didn't know what it means, but they just knew that this was a pivotal moment in technology history, and they felt like they needed to be at the forefront of that. So that created this whole kind of scarcity, you know, where you had some people who were in it and kind of figuring it out, and then other people who couldn't get anywhere near it, who wanted to understand what it was all about. And that early access program, they onboarded clients in waves from July through until October, and then it went generally available on the 1st of November. We've also had other early access programs as well. So Security Copilot was announced in March last year, but the early access program for that only started fairly recently. So that one, in terms of the maturity, is a little bit further behind what we've seen with Copilot for M365. And lots of cat action. Kevin, you missed Sancho holding his cat. Yeah, sorry, he's just he's on top. There we go. He's on top of my bookcase. I've completely distracted now. So let's move on.
I was going to say, one thing I would say, That's all right. One thing I would say that was interesting also about that EAP and the discussions on these co-pilots is those discussions are happening at a higher level. More and more people are demanding that to want to have it. This isn't, in many cases, an IT conversation. It's going to different C-suite members on that who've heard about this. You know, it's the classic story of, oh, I've heard about that on the golf course. Tell me more. But it's that demands that's really making a difference.
Yeah, it's creating a really interesting dynamic, isn't it? Because the business leaders are the ones who can see the potential of this to transform how they run and operate their business and potentially innovate in new and different ways. And you've got IT who are like, whoa, we need to figure it out. We don't know if it's safe yet. And the business leaders are like, we just need to make this work. Figure it out for us. Tell us who needs a license. Who's going to get it? How do we get it out to people? We want you to make it happen. And that's creating a really interesting dynamic across organizations. We've given you an overview of some of the big Copilot announcements, but one of the things that I just found really staggering was how many Copilots there are. And it was a few months ago, I think it was in the run-up to Ignite, when Donna Sarkar said that there are 155 Copilots, Copilot code paths across 89 unique Copilots. So those 89 unique Copilots, there'll be things like Copilot in Word, Copilot in Teams, Copilot in GitHub Copilot, you know, all of those different ones. And then the code branches will be the different versions. So does it have an iOS app and an Android app? Does it have a Windows app and a Mac app? And overall, that's given us 155 Copilot code paths and 89 unique Copilots. And this was 5 months ago. So I dread to think what this number is at now, and I expect that even Microsoft are having trouble keeping up with this. Kevin, do you want to talk to the diagram?
Yeah, so I'd like this diagram. This is one that went out around that time that there was talk of the 155 within there. I should say that 155, when Donna announced it, were ones that either had been announced or were being worked on. She couldn't necessarily talk about within there. And around that time, someone created this lovely circle within it, talking about, you know, the operating system. So you've got things in Windows, you've got that Sentinel Defender on there. We've got the kind of developer side. I see JetBrains sneaking into there, so it's not just Microsoft within there. We've got that Power Platform dynamics that we've talked about, even LinkedIn within there. And I kind of like this. It gives a good view that there's so many that are available within there. As you say, Sancho, there also needs to be a Copilot for Copilots available. But I actually find this a bit overwhelming. This doesn't kind of tell me the value. It doesn't tell me the story of how I'm going to use these, apart from I have a product, it will have Copilots on there. So I've tried to spin this around a different way, and I'm kind of like of being able to split the Copilots into different usages from within there. So you've got those Copilots that are available for everyone. We talked about the Copilot in Windows, Microsoft Copilot, the artist formerly known as Bing Chat Enterprise, and Copilot in Microsoft 365. That really applies to anyone. They can get some value, and different teams will use it, or different roles will use it in different ways. Even different people will find different value they get from it. Some people, I won't name them directly, find the Copilot in Excel really irritating, and I wish it could do so much more, and I'm sure it will soon within there. But then you've got those Copilots by role that go to that next level. So I touch on Excel, finance, love being able to use the Excel side from there. But then you've got the Copilots for finance. We'll talk about naming convention in a minute. You've got things like GitHub Copilot, the security Copilot. Those different roles can really start to help on the magic from it as well. And then Copilot that helps a particular scenario on there as well. Sorry, my wife's asking what I want for dinner. No, it's not the time, darling. From there, you've got those different scenarios that you may want a Copilot that can help you understand Copilots, that can help you understand your policies, that can help you understand how to do licensing. Okay, it's not that good yet within there, but you've got that specific scenario that would come through. Now, it's worth noting across all of these, they could be extensions to Copilots, they could be custom Copilots. We're not saying that these are all ones that are powered by Microsoft. You've got that different slices. And once I put this together, that helped me to bring together some of the different areas, because you've also got the Copilots. I do need to look at the accessibility. I forgot to make this a little bit prettier in this format, but you've got those ways of supporting customers. So things like Copilot for Service, that is all about wrapping around your service desk tool, whether that's Dynamics or whether it's things like ServiceNow, Zendesk within there. You've got what was Viva Sales that then has evolved into the Copilot in Dynamics 365 Sales, and then has become this Copilot for Sales that again wraps over Dynamics but can also work with Salesforce as well, and that's helping your customer interactions. And many of those in Dynamics 365 are there to help that, whether it's field service that can help your field engineers engage with customers better as well. You've then got the more employee organized ones as well. So things like Planner and even much of the Power Platform world, and certainly Viva that comes across from there as well. That's there about helping employees, and certainly in I don't know why my things jumping around all over the place. Certainly that in Windows as well. And then the more specialist areas. So I've kind of said fabric specialist more because it's those data scientists who will be making use of that. But certainly the GitHub Copilot, the security Copilot, that gets more towards those specialist roles. And that can help those for those different roles. And then you've got the scenario that in many cases are powered by those Azure solutions and OpenAI within that as well. And for me, this is a slightly easier way to summarize it down as to where you'd use those different Copilots as well. What you will notice within this is starts to become a theme to that naming convention. So Zoe, I don't know if you want to talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, and we've kind of alluded to the naming a little bit as we've gone through this. So what we've seen over the last few months as Microsoft have renamed is they've started to apply some specific kind of naming conventions. So you'll notice that Copilots generally are either Copilot for something, so Copilot for M365, Copilot for Service, or they're Copilot in something, so Copilot in SharePoint, Copilot in Teams. And you can see these examples along the bottom. Now for the Copilots for something, they tend to be premium. They usually have a premium license. So all of those three that you've got at the bottom have a premium license attached to them. And they give you a few different things. So the Copilot for Service, that gives you Copilot for M365. It gives you Copilot Studio. It gives you the integrations into your help desk service. Whereas things like Copilot in Windows, that's in the operating system that you already have and you're already licensed for. It's focused on delivering that GenAI capability embedded into one product. And now some of these can be extended. So Copilot in Windows, for example, you can potentially extend that with connectors, or will be able to. But these tend to have kind of more specific use cases. Now, Kevin.
So you distracted me with the cat noises there as well. So I mentioned we were going to tie this back into that Power Platform world as well. And I touched on those Copilot for Service, though, that Copilot for Sales. Obviously, that Copilot for Sales, that can link over to Dynamics within there. And then you've got your Dynamics magic with all the Dataverse and things you can bring with that. I would also say with both of those, Copilot Studio will play a very powerful part. If we look at that service element, one of the things with Copilot Studio is you have some of that voice integration that you can bring into that. So you can bring your voice Copilot into there to help you understand in calls and maybe recommend things live from the conversations you're having with people, as well as what's capable within the Copilot for Service as well. And that Copilot for Studio is really powering that low code. Now, if you have come from the Power Virtual Agents and you're going, what's different in Copilot Studio? Nothing but the name is the slightly dodgy, honest answer to that. If you've been keeping up with some of the things that had come through from Power Virtual Agent, really the only thing that is new there, There was a lot of AI powered things like generative answers that were coming through, but they were all really in Power Virtual Agents anyway. So probably the big thing in there is the ability to build extensions to Copilot. I was having an interesting chat with a colleague who made the same assumption I had made. So I'm going to try and help you with this one. If you thought you have built a Power Virtual Agent and the extensions for Copilot for Microsoft 365 and for Service for Sales, it's the same model. If you thought you could create that bot and your extension would be, we're just connecting that bot up. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It is a separate process. You build a bot around your extension, but there is a different trigger within there that actually triggers, that's the Copilot for Microsoft 365 triggers into that. So it is one thing to be aware of. If you've made that assumption that you have some lovely custom Copilots and you just, as soon as available, going to publish it into Microsoft 365's side of things, that is not quite the case. Very happy to have a separate session on that and dig into that further, but it's really important to have that knowledge.
Yeah, and just on that, Kevin, that will come down to licensing, won't it? Because if you look at the licensing for Copilot Studio, it's free to create something to publish in Teams. To publish in M365, you need a Copilot for M365 license, and then a standalone bot has to be licensed separately. So there's no way to go from a standalone bot back down to that M365.
Sorry, we didn't put a slide about licenses, and you've mentioned it. Someone's going to ask a question now.
I just had the same thought, especially with this being Power Platform user group. Licensing is always
absolutely. So ask that question. We'll come back to that. Apart from you, Sancho, you're not allowed on there. We've got those Copilots, those ones in Power Platform, so there's ones in Power Automate, and I'll come on to these a bit more. And Power Pages as well. I think that's a really powerful one of spinning your pages up in natural language more easily as well. We've got those ones embedded in Dynamics that we've talked about. And I've kind of put here Copilot in Fabric. Of course, Fabric includes Power BI as well. So it's that ability to have that chat. It was kind of around for a little while before, but it's even more powerful now in terms of being able to chat about your data and your reports in it too. So let's talk a little bit about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And here specifically, I'm talking about the Power Platform and Copilot overlap worlds within that. And I'd love to hear your opinions on this as well. So this is our opinion, quite a lot of my opinion on this. So I'll give Zoe, I'll give you that get out clause from some of these on there. In terms of the good, I love that ability to kind of spin up those formulas. The number of times, because I do a bit of TypeScript, a bit of C#, then I'll go into Power Platform. I can never remember what the different naming conventions. I'm always going back and forth to Microsoft Learn to try and remember how you do those string functions and how you do push and collect. And I'm sure it's not called push, and I forgot what it is again already. I love that I can ask, do that function that will push this data up to my SharePoint list. I'm just messing with people now. On there, I can do that in natural language, and it will generate that function for me without having to know that naming convention. It will nudge me on the different parameters I need to put in there. I really like that natural language side from there as well. You can talk about what you want and get that formula that comes through. And I would say even more so Dataverse tables. I hate when you know you've got like 20 or 30 columns that you want to create. It's like, oh, look, something's going on. Oh, something else happening. Oh, hang on, I've got to come back to this. Now I can say generate a table. I want it to have these columns. I want them to be named this sort of thing. And especially if I've got them in a list that's been created already with Excel, OneNote, or wherever, I can copy and paste that across and say, generate these columns. I want them to have these sort of fields. Bing, bang, boom, done. Do check it. Do make sure, because generative AI and those large language models hallucinate and change things, but I can very quickly get to those large tables and start moving them quicker. I love that as well. And I also love that ability that you can bring OpenAI into your flow. So I think it was Damien Bird has got a lovely video on this where he built a flow that could take an email, and he had us testing it, email in and say, I want a holiday here. I want it to be for this number of people. And he'd embedded with his flows the Sky Scanner API, and he built the OpenAI connector with it. And it was recommending holidays based on just me sending an email in very chatty text. And we tried to break it a little bit, but generally it worked really well from there to come through. So I love that integration with there. The bad, and I would say this is the case across all the different Copilots, don't assume that you can just do it on there. And I think it was Victor Wieland I saw tweeting about this. He said, one of the problems with large language models is that you need to learn how to prompt with that. But you do need to learn to a decent degree how to get the right thing. It was the same as when we started with Google search and Yahoo search. You had to learn how to search for the right thing. It is the same with all the Copilots, and I would say particularly with a lot of the Power Platform ones, learning what it can do, learning what it can't do, learning the right way to ask it to get the best result from that. Don't just assume you can go, I want an app, I want it to allow me to scan tickets when I go in, tick, 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 boom, done. No, you've got to be a bit more prescriptive and think about that as well.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting one, because if you look at the the videos from Build and Ignite last year, they make it look so easy and so slick. Yeah. You just start with a spreadsheet, you put it in, bish bash bosh, you get this app, and it's got all this stuff built in. And whilst I think there's some cool stuff you can do with it, it's not as easy as they make it look.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I would say there are ways to do that. I know April Dunham's got the prompt library that I think this is part of the PMP Microsoft Tech Community area. I know we've talked about in the show before, and that's got some examples that will guide you towards that, because it can be easy if you want exactly that. It's often not. So do make sure you check for that. And then finally, the ugly. I really hate this, and I played it around and I really want to like it, but building apps in Power Apps from a prompt. Basically, you're going to get the same damn templated app that looks like everything else, and that's not what Power Platform's about. That's the old world of Power Platform that was just like kind of your VB apps and looked grey and things on there. Now you've got that power to make things beautiful. Look at what Louisa Fries and Christine, I'm going to butcher this now, Christine Colatucci plan. What you're going to say ahead of time, people, and on there. But go and check out their blogs. They show you how you can, and the videos, they show you how you can make great looking Power Apps. Copilot isn't going to do that. It's going to look awful within there. So please try it out, have a go with it, give it a go, but don't expect you're going to generate a full working app from it just like that. So Zoe, I think we said at the beginning that actually the Power Platform people are in a good place for this. How do we think that's the case?
So do you want to answer the question in the chat with links to those people's, the links to Louise and Christine's profiles? So I run a global modern work practice. So when you think of modern work, you'll think Microsoft 365. But actually, Power Platform is still a big part of what my team do. And the reason for that is Power Platform crosses everything. I see this more as enabling technology that, regardless of which part of my business people sit in, they can use Power Platform to help deliver value for our customers. So what that means is that, it sits naturally across business applications anyway, but it also works across modern work. We've got people using it to do things related to Azure and integrating into other systems. And what that means is that the people who've got those Power Platform capabilities have a lot of opportunities and a lot of options when it comes to getting involved in Copilot. And that's both Copilot in Power Platform, but actually also all of the other Copilots as well. And we've talked a little bit about how many Copilots there are. It's also the fact that Copilot cuts across everything. What I think happened was, when kind of around the time ChatGPT went mental and Sachi said, we're going to put this in all of our products. What I think happened was that the OpenAI team inside Microsoft basically went off to all of the different product groups and said to them, like, hey, what Copilot do you want us to build for you? And they've built all of these different Copilots. And what they're doing now, I think, is re-engineering a little bit of this. So what we'll start to see is more integration, not just the fact that we've got all of these different Copilot products, but what I expect is that we'll see more integration in the way that they work with each other. Now, Sales Copilot is an example of that, because that works across kind of the Biz Apps and M365 Copilot. But again, you know, if you think about this from a technology perspective, it opens up a lot of options. And when you look at things like Copilot Studio, or the artist formerly known as Power Virtual Agents, and the fact that that is one of the core ways to extend Copilot, regardless of which Copilot it is, again, that gives people who work with Power Platform a huge amount of opportunity. And kind of understanding that, you know, that understanding things like how to run a centre of excellence, how to apply governance, how to manage that development lifecycle, how to align pro code and low code. You know, all of these things are skills that people from a Power Platform background have in spades. You know, you've gone through this journey over the last few years. And what I see now with Copilots and broader Gen AI as well, but, you know, if we keep this to Copilots, what I see now with Copilots is that we need to go on a very similar journey, because we're suddenly having to pull together kind of modern work and pro code and the kind of enterprise architects and data and AI and, you know, all of these different people, and put those governance structures in place and look at how we're building connectors, look at how we're extending, look at how we're automating. And again, all of these things just naturally fall into that wheelhouse of people who've worked with that Power Platform technology stack.
I just add on to that as well. I know Simon Owen, who's out in the community, does a lot with Power Platform, and he's been talking more and more, not just about when he says COE, it's also center of enablement, how you enable things as well. And Power Platform folks with that citizen development have really driven that adoption and change as well. You've gone through that story of helping people to do these things, and that's so critical to the Copilots. So I love that COE is a notion of center of enablement within it, not just the excellence really comes across.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well, because when we look at the use of Copilot, it's not just adoption that we're talking about. I think that enablement word applies to the change aspect of it as well. This is about enabling a change. It's about helping people build that Copilot muscle. It's not just about knowing what you can do with Copilot and thinking, oh, maybe I can use it to help me write an email or build an app or something like that. It's about understanding how you can integrate this into your workflow. And that's a really personal thing, because we all have really personal working habits and practices that we've developed over the course of our career. So the way that I use Copilot is different to the way that Kevin uses it, and will be different to the way that Sancho uses it, because we each have developed these practices through our life. So, you know, when we think about kind of how to make Copilot successful, enabling people to be able to use and adopt this safely in a way that works for them is absolutely key.
Yeah. And I think also sharing those stories as well has been such an important thing. So sharing those ideas from the prompts in the same way you shared those ideas for the apps, in the same way you shared ideas for workflows within your organization and wider, sharing those different things that work becomes really powerful too.
Brilliant. So I think, Sancho, you were the only one that replied when I asked if anybody has kind of used it or has good, bad, ugly stories to share. We have left some time for questions, so, you know, please do feel free to share kind of anything with us. We've just got a little bit about our podcast, but that's only like a couple of minutes. I can see you come off mute, Sancho.
Yeah, well, I mean, since the chat won't be in the video, I'll just mention the question. And that is like the Copilot for Power Apps, for example, is really powerful if you ask it really simple things. It's great and really speeds things up. The problem comes when you try to ask it for something complex. Mm-hmm. It hallucinates, which we see the same issue with all large language models. But what I would like to see is, since we already have something like the Power Apps checker within the Power Apps IDE, just to pass once through there. Mm-hmm. Just, does it even contain a valid formula? If not, regenerate the text. Something as simple as that would be so useful, because what I've seen a lot of is SQL comes out of the Power Apps Copilot, which
Oh, I didn't see that.
those
That's
functions don't exist
interesting.
in Power Apps. So which it makes sense in one hand, because I understand the base of knowledge that they're looking at to draw these copilots from is going to be largely centered around things like SQL, C# and C, because those are the most publicized bits of information out there that they can scrape information from. Power Apps is a relatively new concept. The whole Power Platform, really, 6-7 years, really. That in terms of the history of computing, that's a blip. So the amount of information they can draw from is much less. So yeah, you do tend to see functions from other languages come up. And if you're a new user to Power Apps or Power Automate, you're not going to know that's wrong until you then put it into your app. And by that time, everything's broken. So yeah, even a once over would be great.
Yeah, I can see that. So one of the other things that always makes me laugh is when Copilot generates text and then the editor tells you that the grammar's wrong. It feels like there's this kind of bot-on-bot violence starting.
I just want to take one back, and I think that what you're saying is right, Sancho, and I think having that extra intelligence layer. Obviously, you have to be careful. I think we have seen recently certain other big technology vendors releasing their large language model powered services and try to add that extra intelligence and possibly making sure that they have and noble views are like this, that to have the diversity that comes back when they go there. And yeah, I'm going to name them. The Google Gemini ended up generating images of a very diverse set of Nazis and a very diverse set of different types of people that wasn't correct. It was adding a layer over that wasn't correct. So I do agree with you, Sancho. It'd be lovely to see that. But I think also I like that Microsoft's being a little hesitant to push too much on there. You've got the flexibility. They're putting those responsible elements to stop things breaching that. But adding too much to it could in some ways make it worse. So I think they're being tentative with that, which is a good thing. And they're learning and trying things out absolutely on there as well. But making sure of doing that. I also want to bring something you talked about hallucinating within there. Someone, I genuinely can't remember who described it as this, is you could think about Copilot and Power Platform a bit like a salesperson, because they'll promise all these things and the output actually isn't anything like that as well. And so having that notion of it definitely comes through as well, of always being cautious that comes through from there. And I think it reiterates what you were saying, that people who are new to it, you can't just start with Copilot. You need to start by learning. You need that base level of learning that the Copilots can then help you. If you don't know how to write good English, then you're going to be in trouble. But if you've got a way of it coming through, then it can really help there. And I think, I can't remember who I was speaking with this again the other day, but it was, you can have that very confident level of text that's on there, that when you go back and read, you realize it's completely vacuous. That's right. They said it was like a politician. There was lots of the text that would come through. It had no meaning. It didn't have any substance, but looked great. And you kind of read that quickly and review it and go, yeah, that looks really nice. I think it was someone talking about sending it over to a client, and the client came back and said, you've missed the point completely. There's a whole load of text there that makes no sense, whatever. So it's knowing what's right and being able to truly check that as well.
Yeah, I think those critical reasoning, critical thinking and critical reasoning skills are going to become more important than ever, because I can tell if someone posts on LinkedIn or submits a conference session and they generated it with ChatGPT or Bing, you can tell if you've been using this for the last year or so. You don't need to put a huge amount of effort into edit it to make it so that it doesn't read like that. But yeah, kind of understanding that, being able to actually to edit, being able to check for accuracy, being able to check it answers the question and actually makes sense is going to be increasing. I mean, people should be able to do that anyway, but it's going to become even more important.
I just always I try to think about it from the new user perspective whenever I'm doing things, because as a new user, like you say, you should be checking that, but when they're given both Power Apps or Power Automate or whichever side of things and a Copilot right off the get-go, which one do you think they're going to go for? So a lot of the time they skip past the initial phase of learning and playing around and go straight into the Copilot, which I think is missing a vital part. But I do have something really positive to say about Copilot and Power Automate. Wow. Okay, so Copilot and Power Automate is fantastic because you can ask it to write you complex expressions. If you ask it to write something and you've given it a long list of things it needs to do, it's going to use lots of little individual actions and it's going to be horrible. But if you specifically say, can you write me an expression, and then give it a whole lot of detail, amazing. Like, I spend a lot of time writing expressions because you save on actions in Power Automate. It's just generally a great idea if you could learn expressions instead of doing everything inside 100 apply to eaches. But yes, it was super, super useful in that case. So highly recommend.
And was it more accurate as well, Sandra, than
Yes.
Power? Yeah.
Absolutely. Like leagues ahead in terms of accuracy.
Yeah, I can see Fernanda commenting Copilot in Power BI is fantastic as well. What about you, Kevin? What's your favourite Copilot?
I'm going to, it's going to sound really cheesy, but GitHub Copilot is my favourite because I don't notice it's there. It just makes things better until, and I had this last year, my license expired for the one I had, and I had to renew it, and I hadn't got around to it. And I was like, my goodness, coding's really hard now. I thought I was really good at this, and I'm not. So I do love, I think GitHub Copilot has really built that magic. You talked earlier, Zoe, about finding that habit for things. I think that truly has found that way to fit in the flow, and I hope more and more will gradually get nearer towards that, where it just becomes natural. So I'd say that's probably my favourite, with a close follow-up of just the Copilot, what's the wonderful name for it now? The Microsoft Copilot with graph-grounded chat, I believe is the formal name for the Teams app now, which is just the worst name ever on there. I love that it's just there and always available within it. I've been doing a lot with extensibility on that and being able to connect it to other things, and enjoying a lot with that as well. But you can play around with things. You can get it to rewrite things. So I tend to use that even instead of using the Copilot in PowerPoint, I will tend to go to the M365 chat. I'm going to stick with the easy name and get it to rewrite my splurge. So I will put a load of text down, then say rewrite this into 3 bullet points, and then I can put that into my PowerPoint presentation and keep that splurge as my notes. It allows my brain to kind of, you may have noticed through the session that I tend to witter on slightly and go through that things. It allows me to do that, but I want to make sure my presentation is nice, clear, and more succinct for that. It allows me to have those 2 different ways, so I like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that Copilot chat saves me so much time. Little things like being able to, instead of having to go hunt down someone who knows our partner ID as a Microsoft, or trying to find which site it lives on, I just ask Copilot chat and it gives me it. Or if I lose a link to a file I'm working on with you, Kevin, being able to just say, like, what was the file I worked on for X client with Kevin, and it gets me the link, and I don't have to go hunt it down in my OneDrive or his OneDrive or whichever millions of teams we've got access to.
I thought you just always messaged me about that when you needed those answers. No,
I usually try Copilot chat first. Where are the cats? I've got a cat on the floor here. I've got another cat on the bookcase. Being Copilot is nice. I use it rather than ChatGPT. Yeah, I agree with you there, Fernando. I tend to keep it in the Copilot family as well.
Just a quick ask for those out there. Has anyone used Copilot Pro at all? Has anyone signed up for that? Be interested to hear, because I'm hearing from some people that they're finding that even more powerful. They are seeing the difference between that, as well as the fact it's more consistent. The uptime is better. You get results more often. That paying for that extra thing is being there. But I'm hearing more people who were using ChatGPT have moved over, who were paying for ChatGPT have moved over to Copilot Pro and finding it generally better. Which is interesting. If I'm honest, I didn't expect that, so that's good. I thought people were quite wedded to ChatGPT, but not. which is interesting.
Yeah, my fiance works in tech. He just started, he literally signed up for ChatGPT Premium like 2 days before Microsoft lifted the 300 seat minimum. But I think he's swapped over now. Right, okay, so we've got a few minutes left. Please feel free to carry on adding comments or questions in the chat. We'll just talk a little bit about Copilot Connection. So, as you've gathered from all of the history that we've taken you through, this journey with Copilots over the last, 14 months has been incredibly confusing, incredibly noisy. The amount of information that comes out, the amount of updates, the amount of name changes, the amount of licensing changes, all of the products in and for, and there's just so much noise from this. And Kevin and I were kind of doing a lot of this stuff at work anyway, and dealing with a lot of questions from people, both who we work with in the community and our customers, where everybody was just confused. So one of the things that we really wanted to do with the podcast was find a way to cut through some of this noise and confusion and try to simplify it and make it easier for people to understand a little bit.
My cue to add something, isn't it? I have to be honest, I got very distracted. I was trying my other favorite one, which is within the Bing, that you can have those Copilots. You've got plugins within there, including Suno, where you can write a song. And I was trying to finish with a nice song about this, but my typing's far too slow. And it's things like this that we want to be able to have that opportunity to kind of dig through there. And to try and be honest, I think we've been fairly clear that there's some of the Copilots that are amazing, that make a difference. Generally, Copilot's made a difference, and then there's Copilot and Power Apps to create new Power Apps. It's a bit rubbish on there, so we want to be able to be honest with these things and to be able to challenge that, to bring up some of the bad things that happened. I don't know if we can jump to the next slide. Actually, I missed this one from the list, but at the beginning of the year, we kind of took what we thought was going to happen over the year. And I think one of the things, and we're still seeing this, is there's going to be more and more kind of contention, legal challenges to things like OpenAI. I have to be honest, didn't expect Elon, probably should have expected Elon to come into this, but people saying they're using my information, how is this okay? It's going to be some of those conversations to keep an eye on. I love Copilot with this, because certainly where you have that, the paid-for version in Copilot for Microsoft 365, and you have the artist formerly known as Bing Chat Enterprise, you have that copyright protection within there that gives you that reassurance on there before anyone panics on there. So we try and cut into some of these news and bring the reality back to it as well. And bring people like Tricia Sinclair talk. We had a lovely session with her. In fact, we had two, and I managed to hit record on one of them. That's talking about the Dynamics customer service and what that means to service. So we're trying to bring other people and other angles into this as well.
Yeah, and we've actually got quite a lot of interviews that are embedded into some of our episodes as well. So when either Kevin or I or both of us have been at conferences, we've been interviewing people from Microsoft or MEPs, people who are active in the community, just to get their view of Copilot as well. I know you were trying to get that GPT to work to create a song, Kevin, but actually on the podcast, all of our artwork is AI generated. The theme tune that we have at the start of the podcast, we used an AI tool to generate that as well. Lots of the images in this that are not the Microsoft ones or photos were all AI generated. So we do try to play around with it as much as possible. And one of our favourite episodes was the last one on here around the Copilot myths. And we recorded that one because we just saw, as more people started to get access to the different Copilots, what we saw was this propagation of myths, things that were just, some of them were maybe true, but there were some things that were just blatantly untrue that people were reporting on social media as facts. So what we wanted to do was to try to cut through some of those myths. I think that was a really interesting conversation, wasn't it, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, that song's awful. Yeah, and I think it was also, we were seeing some of the news coming out that kind of countered some of those myths as well. So it was a good chance to bring those things through. And again, people hallucinate, often in many cases as much as Copilot does. So it's always worth checking your evidence on there. What we'd really love, though, subscribe. Actually, you should get the links handy. I've just realised I've got to add those on there. But check out copilotconnection.com. Hopefully, you should be able to click on these links on the screen right now. On there, we've got links to our socials on LinkedIn, Twitter. Yes, I'm still calling it that. As well, we have the YouTube channel, so we do always record it and put it on there and subscribe. But more importantly, we'd love to know what you would like to hear as well, to bring more and find out what are the questions that you have around Copilots that are important to you. So yeah, let us know in the chat or reach out on one of the social channels, and we can see that. And also, if there's people you want to hear us bring to hear on the show, let us know as well. But I think that's probably about time to start wrapping up as well.
Indeed. Well, that was absolutely amazing. Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Kevin. Got a lot of questions to think about tonight now. So for everyone watching, this is the last session. If you have any other questions, be sure to check out the recordings. The recordings will be up on YouTube, on Sharon Sumner's YouTube channel, so you can catch them all there in a few days. Thank you again to all our speakers. It was a really, really great session. We had so many great people today, and I learned a lot, which is kind of the point of these things. So it was really good. So yeah, thank you everyone for attending. If anyone wants to hang around after and have a few chats with Kevin, Zoe, and whoever else is left here, feel free.
Thanks very much.
Are you going to Seattle next week, Sancho?